All right, welcome everyone to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Fennell, CRNA. Thank you for joining me today. If you have been a listener from the beginning, which has only been for a few weeks because this is a new podcast, thank you so much. Go ahead and don't forget to give me a review. I would love that. I love hearing from you guys. And also make sure that you subscribe to this podcast. I would love to keep you around, and so that way we can hang out every single week. So today's topic is going to be one that even if you haven't gained acceptance yet, I think it's worth hearing. And it's essentially how to land a job after anesthesia school, after you've graduated, passed boards. And so I'm going to kind of shed some light on that. And so that way it'll give you guys, whether you're already in the program or whether you're hoping to become a CRNA someday, it'll definitely help you guys think about these things as you embark on your journey. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing I want to point out is that, and this is not always the case, this depends on location and really kind of location, because some places, typically hire students after they graduate. And then there's other places where you could have a job lined up with a year left in your program. And so again, this can vary based on location and state and job market and all of those things. However, I want to let you guys know that because it is not uncommon for SRNAs to have a job lined up 6+ months prior to graduation. There's nothing wrong with not having a job lined up the day that you graduate, but you should at least be having interviews essentially lined up because keep in mind, by the time you actually pass boards, you're going to have probably on average a 3-month process of accreditation on average. So that's definitely hurtful when you are broke and not working. And so you want to try to expedite that process as much as possible by having a job lined up. So when you do pass boards, you're not waiting more than 3 months to actually start working and getting that first paycheck. But then the question becomes, well, how do you land that dream job after school? And I'm going to share from you guys based on my own personal experience and based on the experience of my students and kind of some good ways to kind of tackle that. First and foremost, this might seem obvious, but your clinical rotations that you take on as a student are a great way for exposure, not only into the networking system, but just your performance. And essentially, it's a small community. People talk. So you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward when you're going into your clinical setting. Even if you're a senior and you're burnout, even if you hate pediatrics and you're like, oh, I'm dreading this rotation, or if you hate OB, don't have an attitude going into those rotations. Even if you know this is not for you, it's not something you want to do long-term, make sure you're still giving it your all, because you never know who someone knows. And, just because you don't like pediatrics or like OB, your hospital could still do other things. You don't just have to do OB. Where I worked, you could choose to do OB or you could choose not to do OB. There are opportunities for a bunch of different types of specialty rotations within one hospital setting. So if I were to go into my OB rotation and bomb it, would that hospital maybe even consider hiring me after school? I don't know. They would pick someone else before you if they had the option. So make sure your clinical rotations, again, even if it's not something you're excited about, that you're putting your best foot forward, go prepared, make sure you're friendly, make sure you're a team player, make sure, again, you're just being flexible. And, if they change your assignment, don't throw a fit. It happens. It even happens as a CRNA where your assignment can change last minute. It's just the nature of the game. Again, being flexible is a very big part of being a CRNA, is being adaptable and flexible, because things change very quickly, including your assignment. So that's kind of what I want to say from the get-go. Make sure you're going into your clinical rotations with your best foot forward. Make sure you're smiling at everyone. Make sure you're introducing yourself. Make sure you're not participating in any gossip. And, I had a program director who was amazing, and he no longer is the program director. He did retire, but one of the things he used to routinely say, and it has stuck as kind of like a slogan, essentially, of the program, is speak low, speak slow, and do not say too much. And I am not alone in the fact that has stuck with me through all my years of being a CRNA, as well as as a student. My time as a student, very, very wise words. Not that I, like the term keep your head down, but at the same time, when you're a student, you want to make sure that, you're staying calm, you're staying You're speaking slow so people can understand you. You want to make sure the communication's clear. You want to make sure that you're not getting overly voicey, or extremely opinionated. Extremes of anything are never good, but if someone's coming back at you with maybe why they didn't like the way you did something, you need to hear them out. You need to listen to them. You don't then automatically defend yourself. You need to say, okay, well, let me listen to you and be open to the possibility that maybe I was in the wrong, or maybe I'm not wrong, but maybe it's not your way and maybe there's a better way. Or maybe we can agree to disagree. You don't have to say that openly or outwardly. You could say, okay, well, my mind, I know I didn't do anything wrong. In my mind, I like what I did for the patient because of X, Y, and Z in the outcome. But maybe it's when I'm working with this particular person, maybe I just can't do it this way because they don't like it. And you're just going to have to smile and go with it and know that someday when you're out on your own as a CRNA, you can do it the way you like. But as a student, it's not your place to argue with your preceptor on something that really is not important at the end of the day. As long as your patient is safe, as long as what you're doing is good for the patient outcome, it doesn't matter how you do it or how you roll your towel or how you label your drugs or whatever the issue is. I don't know. I'm just speaking from little piddly things, really. But you're going to get critiqued on all kinds of things as a student. So again, just using your best judgment on how you react to that kind of criticism or critiquing is really key with creating a good environment to do your rotation in, and as well as a good opportunity for a future job. Keep in mind, once you are, even if like say you didn't like a lot of your preceptors at a location, don't let that deter you from taking a job there. Because remember, when you're a CRNA, you're not working in the OR with your coworkers. You're working in the OR by yourself with your attending. So it's more important to you get along with the attendings versus the actual CRNAs. Not that you don't want to get along with people. You want to like who you work with, but you're not going to force to be around them in the operating room day in, day out. So it's not like you're going to clash or butt heads every single day. If that is the case during some of your rotations. So just remember that. Also, just make sure, you're asking questions as you're an SRNA and you're going through your clinical rotations. Make sure you're talking to CRNAs. Make sure you're asking kind of difficult questions like, do you like your job? What are the pros? What are the cons? Do you think people are happy here? Or what is the most senior CRNA working here? Do people does that facility have high turnover? Just kind of asking what their work-life balance is. Do they get stuck all the time? And as a student, most of the time, now I'm speaking, variations exist. Some students are expected to stay to finish their room. Some students automatically get out at 3 o'clock. Okay. And so it depends on where you are. But if you're always getting out at 3 o'clock, you may not realize that CRNAs get stuck all the time. And so if you're getting out at 3, but your CRNA is getting stuck, is that kind of the environment that you're going to be walking into when you take a job there? Because as a CRNA, you're not going to get to go home at 3. As an actual CRNA, you're going to be expected to stay till you're told you can leave, essentially. And based on how they staff it and how they allow add-ons, I've worked at places where you routinely get stuck. And yes, maybe fourth quarter towards the end of the year is worse than, January time. Maybe in January, you get out early sometimes. So it can fluctuate, but you can count on fourth quarter at least once a week to be stuck over the end of your shift, which is hard when you have obligations outside of work, when you're taking your kids to basketball or you have swim practice or you have an appointment you have to make. And so knowing whether that's kind of an environment that you're walking into can help make your choice and if you want to work there. And don't get me wrong, there's no such thing as a rainbow job. You're not going to find a job where everything's peachy all the time. You're going to have some positives and negatives to every position you can possibly take after school. So you can't look for perfection. It just doesn't exist. But so you have to consider the whole picture. What's the work-life balance like? Are they paid well at least? Are they compensated to stay over for their time? Are the CRNAs happy regardless of that? Or do they work with the CRNAs? Meaning if a CRNA has something they have to get out for, do they maybe trade with one another so they don't get stuck on a day they have somewhere they have to be after work? There's a lot of factors that go into it. So that's why it's important to at least talk to your CRNAs you're working with in the operating room and see if they are happy and have high job satisfaction with where they currently are working. And also, if you have a CRNA that you're working with who has been to multiple facilities, meaning maybe you're working with a CRNA who actually because sometimes you'll run into a CRNA who took a job there after school and 6 years later, they're still there. That's the only experience they have. They're happy. Maybe it's not perfect, but they don't really have anything to compare it to. It's really kind of nice to get to know a CRNA who has other experiences, maybe one who locums somewhere, or because I promise you, you'll have much more insight because they will have seen other things. And I even have seen it in my time. I've only been to 3 different places in 7 years. So, I mean, ideally, I like to stick around if I can. I mean, I wasn't anticipating taking 3 different jobs in 7 years. One of my first jobs, I was there for 4.5, and we only moved because I wanted to be closer to family. But then I kind of had an unforeseen where maybe I wasn't super happy where I was and I left, and I'm happy again. But I've seen 3 different facilities and how they function and how they're different. And so I can probably shed a little bit of light in comparison more than just someone who's had one job only, and that's all they have to compare it to other than their ICU job. And so sometimes I see people complain about certain things, and I'm like, in the big scheme of things, you guys, you have it good, because I've seen a lot worse, so it's kind of nice to kind of get perspective from someone who's maybe seen other variations. So keep that in mind too, when you're picking CRNAs to ask these questions, that you're maybe picking someone who can give you an outsider perspective on different facilities. So yeah, it kind of brings me back to like networking. So by doing this, you're essentially networking. You want to be friendly. You're not going to like every preceptor you have, maybe personality wise, whatever, but you're going to find ones you really do click with, that you really do like, and that maybe even become friends with. Make sure you're exchanging cell phone numbers, emails, make sure you're staying in contact with them, even after you leave that rotation. Maybe if you know their birthday, check up on them on their birthday and say, hey, happy birthday. Hope you're doing well. Or you never know, because after graduation, you could be needing them for a job reference, or maybe even 5 years down the road, you could want to reach out to them for a job reference because now you're moving and you're going to be working at that facility. So those type of relationships really go a long way. And I shouldn't even say 9 times out of 10, I should say 10 times out of 10, every single time when someone applies for a job at any facility, any hospital, that chief CRNA is going to then go to their staff and say, hey, do any of you know so-and-so? Do any of you know someone who knows so-and-so? Most of the time, this is where it's more like 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, someone will know someone who knows that person. And so essentially, you're getting a reference within a reference, meaning you apply to a job, and then the first thing they're going to do is they're going to try to find someone who at least knows someone who knows this person, who can vouch for the fact that they're would be a good coworker, they would be a good fit. And so word of mouth gets around. The community is small. I know CRNAs. I'm in Ohio. I know CRNAs in Alaska. I know CRNAs in Hawaii. I know CRNAs in California and Tennessee and New York. Everywhere. So it's just, I can probably reach out to someone and they'll know someone somewhere. So again, it's very easy to find people to know in this community, which I like a lot. It's really nice to have that tight knit network. If you don't know anyone in a facility you're going to have your baby at, guess what? You can find someone. And then before you know it, you have 5 people who are going to look after you, and you're going to know who's going to do your epidural. It's really nice. It's the benefit of being a CRNA. You can ask about surgeons and about, you kind of have insider knowledge. And same thing goes when you're looking for jobs. You're going to know someone who's like, oh my gosh, I would love for her to come work here. I'd love for him to work here. They're excellent. I knew him as a student, or I knew him as a CRNA. I knew him even maybe in the ICU. You never know where the relationships can take you. So it's always key when you're working that you're making sure that you're making an impression on people that you're working with. So again, reference letters, connections. And so a lot of students tell me like, gosh, I'm looking for a job out of state. I've never rotated in these facilities. How am I supposed to get a job there? Ask a CRNA if they know someone, and chances are at least someone you talk to will know someone in that state who can put you in contact with a CRNA who can then talk to you. And so, yes, there's endless possibilities. And so utilize the network, utilize the connections the CRNAs have to help you in your job hunt after school. Another good way to get involved, especially if you want to get hired within the state, is look for state organization events. Every state has a nurse anesthesia association, okay? And you really need to be getting involved in those, not just for the profession's sake and for your own sake, but because it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing. The career gives back to you in many ways. You need to make sure you're supporting the associations, whether it's on a national level or at a state level. But looking for state association events to go to is a great way to network and get involved in the community to see the value of that. I really think it's important. So, and I see it time and time again, and I'm guilty of it, where, you graduate, you put your blinders on, you're making money, you have a family, you travel, you just enjoy not being in school. And you're like, woo, this is awesome. I'm just living life and everything's fine. It wasn't until I was out of school for over 5 years, you guys, till I realized the importance of supporting not only on a national level, which I always did anyways, because I always was a member of the ANA, but when I just paid my dues. I didn't do anything, but I'm realizing now that giving back to your profession is so, so key and vital, because you want to support your profession that is giving you the career you love and for future generations to come. So same thing can be said for the state association. Not only is it a great way to network and meet people and find opportunities, but it's just a good way to get involved. I'm not saying you have to commit a ton of time to doing anything. Just being connected is a big part of being proactive in your own profession. So that's another way that you can get involved. And same thing goes with the on the national level. If you get involved on a national level, well, for sure, you're going to have connections all over the country. But one of the students that I know, and he's a friend of mine, and he actually just graduated, he's from Ohio. He has always dreamed of going out west to practice. He wants independent practice. He wants to live in the ski town. And, that's always been his dream after school. And you would think, okay, coming from Ohio, how in the heck are you going to get a new grad position out west where you've never rotated? They don't know you, yada, yada. It's an independent CRNA practice. So how do you do that as a new grad? Well, he was smart. He planned for this. From the time he started school, from the time he graduated, he planned to make sure his experience was going to set him up for success in that area. So one of the things he did was he made sure his program offered independent practice experience. And he also made sure that program knew he needed and wanted that experience as a student, because I highly doubt they rotate all the students through those areas. It's probably based on, hey, do you raise your hand and say, I would like that experience, to speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself that you want that experience. And so again, he made sure he got that. He made sure, again, that he could build his resume such that he had that experience. So when he went out there to interview for his dream job someday, that he could support himself and saying he, as a new grad, he can hit the ground running and go with all the independent CRNAs. He also networked with people out there from early on. And so seeking out who are the contacts out there? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to get in touch with to make that connection? And so he did that, and it enabled him to get an interview after he graduated, or he graduates technically in a month, but he just interviewed. And so now he's got his dream position. So I think that's really awesome. That, again, if you're proactive about what you think, even if you don't know what you want, just trying to be proactive as much as you can by making those connections will go a long way. Remember, you always have Typhon, which keeps track of all your numbers. So it's a great way to say, okay, I've had this many regional blocks, I've had this many open heart cases. And so if you're going into a kind of a subspecialty like pediatrics, OB, or open heart, when you're a student, make sure you're trying to seek out extra experience. I used to work for a place who would allow students in their last year to pick an extra specialty rotation. That was kind of unique to that hospital, that setting, that wasn't offered to all students at all locations, but that particular hospital hired a lot of students. And so they essentially wanted their students to come into their work environment with the skills and knowledge they wanted, not just needed, but wanted, so they could have the practice they also wanted. So if you wanted more open heart experience, guess what? You could pick a second rotation open heart. If you wanted more pediatric experience, you could pick a second rotation in pediatrics or OB, or whatever you wanted, again, to get more skills and more hands-on with, which I thought was a really great feature for the students. So seeking out opportunities like that, it never hurts to ask, is to see if you can get extra time in a specialty rotation. I also know programs, if you make it known from the beginning that you really want to do pediatric anesthesia, again, they can set you up for a longer specialty rotation in that area. And as far as the actual CRNA interview goes, you guys, it's going to be like a walk in the park compared to your actual anesthesia interview, maybe give or take. I know some CRNA school interviews are pretty laid back. It's more like get to know you person, just like a normal interview, but some CRNA school interviews are extremely grueling. But I think even if it wasn't like an extremely grueling CRNA interview, it's high pressure, to interview for CRNA school. And not that interviewing for a CRNA position is not high pressure, but it's not if you consider how competitive it is to get an anesthesia school versus getting a CRNA job. We're very fortunate that we have a great job market. I'm not saying you have no competition, but you're in high demand. And essentially, as long as you've done a good job in clinical and people can speak highly of you, chances are you're going to get a position if there's a position open. But the CRNA interview, some of the common things they may ask you is maybe tell me about a weakness of yours. Just like they would in the CRNA interview, you have to be aware of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. So knowing those things going into the interview is key. They may ask you how you deal with conflict. They may ask you, essentially they ask you, what are you looking for? What do you want your practice to be? What are your long-term career goals? So those might seem common sense, but make sure you're thinking about that. Make sure you have at least like, what are your interests? You should know what you're interested in. By the time you're getting ready to graduate, you should know what types of cases, what types of things you want to be doing with your career long-term. So that's essentially all a CRNA interview is. You may interview with a team of docs, a team of CRNAs, and just get to chat with them and maybe ask them about their facility. I do encourage you to go into your CRNA interview knowing as much as you can about the facility, because it will just seem kind of like you're not that interested if you walk in there and think they do hearts and they're like, no, actually, we don't do any hearts here. Like that should be something you should already know prior to going to your interview. So make sure you're not walking in to your CRNA interview thinking this is a facility that does a bunch of regional blocks and they don't do any. You should already know those types of things prior to going into the interview. Again, it just shows interest. If you already have a good handle on kind of what they can offer you, it just shows that you took initiative to look those things up and to kind of ask around, talk to CRNAs. Before you go into any CRNA interview, you really should already be trying to be connected with a few CRNAs in that facility to give you some information about it that maybe you couldn't find out through the recruiter or through online. But you can usually talk to a recruiter prior to your CRNA interview and kind of get some insight as to what to expect with, benefits and stuff like that. And that's another thing too, is you really want to make sure you're looking at the whole package when you're picking out a job after school and knowing that you can't have everything. You have to kind of pick what matters to you the most. Is it location? Is it money? Is it the acuity or the types of cases they do? Is it independent practice? Is it hours? Because I'll tell you right now, no matter where you go, that's all going to be slightly different. So, and you can't find a facility that does it all. I tried. When I was getting ready to graduate, my goal was I want to do it all. I want to do open heart. I want to do OB. I want to do peds. I want to do, I did want to do regional, but I also knew realistically, the fact that I found a hospital that did open heart, a bunch of neuro, OB, pediatrics, that in itself is pretty unique. Most hospitals do not do peds along with adults. Most of the time you have like a designated pediatric only hospital. So I thought that was great. I thought it was great that CRNAs could rotate and do OB and do open heart. So again, that's kind of where I leaned towards that kind of a setting to where I could gain my initial practice. And I'm really glad I did. I loved it there. But I didn't do any regional, so my second position as a CRNA was heavy regional. We did a lot of regional, but I found myself not liking it, so it just goes to show you that you think you want it all. You think you want these skills, and don't get me wrong, it was a great experience, but I didn't even enjoy it. I probably would have enjoyed it if it was a different type of workload. It was a lot for me to take, to do 30 some regional blocks in a single shift for me was extremely overwhelming. And that facility just was very, very fast paced. And I just didn't like it. And it was a surgery center. So again, very different than a level 1 trauma center as far as the way things are set up and the way things are run. It was very different. And again, I didn't like it. So it is what it is. It is nothing against them, nothing against me. It's just, we both had to part ways and move on. So sometimes you think but you don't always know. So make sure you're giving yourself some grace and knowing that your first job out of school is not going to be the end of everything. You're going to have plenty more in store for you down the road. And just because you get out of school and you do no regional doesn't mean you can't get hired as a CRNA at a place that does a lot of regional. Clearly, I'm living proof of that. I had no experience, and they did all on the job training. I hadn't had any regional experience since school. And again, within like 3 months, I was doing 25, 27 blocks in one day. So again, it's possible. And I think I only spent 2 weeks training on top of that. So 2 to 3 weeks training. And then they're like, oh, you're on your own, fly. And it was fine. It was fine. It went really well. And I was actually better than I expected to be at regional blocks, but I just didn't like it. So, it is what it is. So knowing that, again, your first job could just be a stepping stone. And if you don't get the independent practice job, maybe you don't even feel comfortable with an independent practice job. I know myself, I wouldn't have been comfortable in an independent practice job as a new grad. And that's just me, my own personal personality and style and comfort level. I wanted, I didn't want that. Does it mean I don't want it in the future? No, I'm actually curious about it. Potentially, you never know. I'm only 7 years into my career, you guys. I hope to work for 30 years as a CRNA. So I think the doors are wide open. The possibilities are endless. Never, ever limit yourself. That's the only way you will limit yourself, is if you limit yourself, right? So you have to be willing and open to kind of do something you're not comfortable with that you've never done before if you ever want to grow. So keep that in mind. The same thing goes with your CRNA career. If you get too comfortable in what you're doing and you think that this is it, it's only it because you're making it. If you are willing to try and put yourself out of your comfort zone, you can do whatever you want. So just know that. Another thing I want to point out too is sometimes in school you don't get good numbers, meaning maybe you had a bad OB rotation, maybe you had a bad heart rotation, and that was me as well. When I was in school, I came from the MICU. I didn't have a cardiac background. I didn't even think hearts was actually something I would enjoy, because when I was a nurse's aide, I would occasionally rotate to an open heart unit, and I was somewhat traumatized a few times. One of them being that the patient actually fell on top of me and coded on me on the floor, which I couldn't get him off of me, and he was dying on top of me. So yeah, that was a very traumatic experience as a nursing student, as a nurse's aide. And so I remember, like, every time I would go to that unit, I'd watch someone get their chest cracked open, do the massage, right there in the bed. And maybe they were 20 years old. And I just was like, what in the heck? Like, I don't ever want to do open heart. This is terrifying. This is awful. I ended up working in the MICU. I'll be flat out honest with you guys. I wasn't like a diehard ICU nurse. I wasn't someone who was like, I always want to do ICU. I really didn't like my time in the ICU, not because I didn't like ICU. I loved the ICU part of it. I didn't like the death and the suffering, and it just was very depressing for me. And it was hard for me mentally to cope with that all the time, day in, day out. That's off on a tangent, so I apologize. But that being said, back to your numbers in school, I only had 5 open heart experiences, 4 of which were in person. 1 was an observation. That's you need 5. So I barely got my numbers in school for my open heart. Same thing with my OB rotation. I had tons of spinals by the time I went to my OB rotation. Unfortunately, as a student, they always want to put me in these C-section rooms, and I got stuck in there. They never let me roam the floor for an epidural. And the thing is about an epidural is you have to be ready and available whenever they need it. So to be stuck in a C-section room all day when you're getting your OB rotation experience, you're not going to be able to get out to do the epidural. So unfortunately that happened to me, and I barely got my numbers for my epidurals, even though I tried to stand up for myself. It just didn't work out. And funny enough, or oddly enough, that was the same hospital that I took a job at afterwards, where I wanted to do open heart and I wanted to do OB. So when I took a job there, I was like, I actually want to do open heart and I want to do OB, but these are my numbers. And guess what? You guys gave me my OB rotation here. So, now you're going to have to train me essentially as a CRNA, just like a student who didn't get a good experience. And they did. It was fine. I mean, I spent a few weeks with a CRNA in an open heart room every day, 5 days a week for a couple weeks. And then I was on my own. And same with like OB. I'd always have a backup, resource person. I always had someone to kind of, come and help me troubleshoot if I needed help troubleshooting an epidural. And within, a few weeks, I was fine. And so I want to tell you guys that, because I don't want you to stress about not getting your numbers in school. For me, that was very stressful. I remember crying about it, remember being upset about it, thinking I would never be okay as a CRNA if I got bad numbers as a student. And it just wasn't true. So again, regional, hearts, OB, all of that, pretty much for me, most of that was on the job training as an actual CRNA, not as an SRNA. So knowing that shouldn't limit you and your possibilities as you go out into the workforce and look for a job. I mentioned that credentialing takes 3+ months. Be aware of that. I graduated in August and I had a job lined up a year prior to starting school. And I started in October and got my first paycheck the middle of October. So I had to go through that period of time with no income and just not working. I passed boards. I graduated and took boards 2 weeks later, which is probably on the end of being sooner rather than later kind of spectrum. If you want to, I think most students take at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 or 4. I made sure I'm not a procrastinator. I never have been. I'm the kind of person, if you tell me to do something, as long as I will try my darndest to make sure it's done at the time that it's supposed to do it. I hate procrastination. So I made sure I did everything my program told me to do. I did lesson plans every single week in Prodigy. There's also Apex nowadays. But again, I did the work they told me to do. And so when I was done with school, I felt like I could pass boards. I didn't have to worry about cramming. I'm not a crammer, first of all. I don't remember things when I cram. So I felt pretty confident I could go into boards with a pretty solid memory at that point. So I encourage you to do that versus cramming, because cramming is never going to benefit you long term. Briefly, I want to touch on stipends. A lot of students wonder about, stipends, opportunities. And I actually did take a stipend. It came with a 4-year work contract. My only piece of advice for that is, by all means, if you get one, take one, but make sure you're still researching your facility and don't overlook bad things because of the money. Don't let the money blind you. You don't want to take a job that you're going to be miserable at and be held to a 4-year contract all for money. You will be miserable. And I promise you, I've seen people do it. It's not pleasant. They end up, a lot of these places, when you break those contracts, you have to pay back part of your stipend, if not part of that plus interest. So it could be a big deal. It could be a very bad, expensive mistake, and they will come after you. They have lawyers to do that. So don't think you're going to get off clean and dry, because you won't. Keep in mind who you're up against. You're up against these big hospitals, they have lawyers and people to go after you for the money. So, don't take a stipend unless you're 110% certain you can actually withhold the contract that you agree to under the terms. Some of them are 2 years, some of them are 3, some of them are 4. I mean, they're all various, they're all different. Most of the time when a hospital gives you money like that, though, you're going to owe some type of time requirement to them. So just something to keep in mind. Make sure you're talking to the CRNAs who work there. Are you happy? Because I want to take a stipend, but I don't want to sign my life away for the next 4 years. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence and still researching the facility. Don't just sign up for a facility who's offering a stipend without actually looking into the work environment first. So I hope that kind of gives you guys something to think about when you're off on your journey into looking for jobs. But, I guess don't stress about it. It will happen. I think it's hard as a student because you see your classmates get jobs and you're like, oh gosh, I don't have a job yet. I'm going to be in trouble. No, you're going to get a job. The job market's great. It's more of it comes down to, what are you looking for and what are the most important things you're looking for? Are you looking for, again, location? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for acuity? Are you looking for independence? Are you looking for your hours? I can tell you right now, when I first graduated, I was more about experience. And I wanted a lot of hours because I wanted a place that could give me overtime, because I had a lot of student loan debt and I really wanted to tackle that. I wanted opportunities to do 24-hour shifts, which I did. Now where I'm at, I have 2 kids. We have a 3rd one on the way here in like a few weeks. Actually, by the time you hear this episode, baby might already be here. I don't know. But that being said, for me right now, I want my hours. I don't even care about money. I don't care. I want my hours. That's what's most important to me now, is being home and present for my family. There's going to be a day and time where my kids don't want to hug me anymore. And when that day happens, I'll go back, maybe pick up my hours at work and do things like that. But for now, when they actually want mommy, I want to be around. So again, things throughout your career are going to shift. So don't worry about the job you take right after school. It doesn't have to be your forever job. I mean, you don't obviously want to hop around a bunch either, because it's going to look bad on your resume if you can't stay put somewhere. But essentially things happen, life happens, and you have to adapt. You have to adjust with those changes. So I hope that lessens the fear and anxiety going into it. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys, and we'll see you next week for next week's episode. All right. Bye-bye.